Hello, I am Mauro Cesar, and I am the co-chair of the 2021 Oxford Africa Conference. Today, I have the extreme honor and pleasure to be joined by Mr. Abdul Samad Rabiu. I cannot shy away and say that I am not feeling very excited and shy at this particular moment because Abdul Samad Rabiu is a Nigerian billionaire, entrepreneur, and philanthropist. He is the founder and chief executive officer of the BUA Group, which is a Nigerian conglomerate focused on agriculture, infrastructure, manufacturing, logistics, and port operations. Additionally, Mr. Abdul Samad Rabiu is also the chairman of the Nigerian Bank of Industry. Sir, I am very grateful to be joined here with you today. I would like to say that this year's conference is themed African Development, Rewriting Our Story and Asserting Africa's Future. And really, my co-chair and I chose this theme because we believe it is important to showcase that the Oxford Africa Conference, which has been the largest convening on Africa in Europe, we want to use this opportunity to showcase the excellence that occurs across various industries on the African continent. And we are also united in our decision to ensure that we are not focusing excessively on our issues, but instead we're focusing on talking and addressing solution-oriented discussions as the ones that we hope to have this morning.
Thank you so much, Mark.
No, thank you, sir. So just first and foremost, I would like to ask you, tell us a little bit about your personal story of how you came about to be one of the most successful and influential entrepreneurs, not just in the continent, but worldwide.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mauro. But before we continue, I'd like to make a correction. You mentioned that I'm the chairman of Bank of Industry. I was the chairman for 6-7 years, but I'm no more the chairman of Bank of Industry in Nigeria, just as a correction. So that is that. Yes, in 1984, I started in 1984 when I came back from school from the States and joined the family business in Nigeria. Then my father, was a big trader, importing, food items, and also chemicals and other stuff, to Nigeria. So I joined him and I worked with him for, 4 years. And in 1988, with his blessing and support, and some seed money, I decided to actually branch out and to start my own business, which I, then formed BOA International. That was in 1988. At that time in Nigeria, most companies were mainly importing almost everything. So we started with the importation of mainly food items, edible oils, fertilizers, chemicals, sugar, rice, cement, and all those things. And at the time, that was what most people were doing. But one story that I've not really told very well, was, the story of a company that was a government company at the time, a steel company called Delta Steel, which was established by the government of Nigeria at the time. It was, the company started production, around 1985, 86. And then it was so much money that the government of Nigeria spent. But unfortunately, they did not have working capital. So we approached them and we secured some facilities and credit lines for them, to be able to get their raw materials. At the time, Nigeria was importing about 1 million tons of steel. And believe it or not, that plant, the capacity was also 1 million tons, but they could not import anything because they did not have the credit lines. So you have this huge, plant, producing 1 million tons of liquid steel, but no working capital, to actually import anything. So when we approached them, we were able to agree, a deal with them, and, we were importing most of the raw materials for them. And we were doing almost 500,000 tons of steel with our company. So that was a defining, a moment for us. It was a very good transaction, and it went on, for like 3 or 4 years. So that story is a story that I've actually not been, I think it's a story that one day I need to sit down and really go through it properly, because it was a defining moment in our journey, in our business journey, and we did very well with that. So after that, we continued, with our imports and, mainly, food items, as I said, nobody was into, production at the time. So we continued, with the imports.
And just as a follow-up to that question, so you first started importing these items in 1988, I believe. So when did you see a major change happen in those industries, and what actions and conditions led you to then change to cement, sugar, real estate, which today makes up a substantial proportion of your business portfolio?
Yes, at the time, as I mentioned, most companies were just mainly importing. And when we, as we were importing, I actually saw, an opening, because I was traveling, a lot, and most of the, goods and products we were importing were more or less processed or finished goods. So we felt, look, maybe it would be a good idea for us to add a little bit of value in some of the things that were important. So we started with actually importing bulk edible oil and processing it and packaging it. Of course, we were still importing, but we were adding a little bit of value. So we started from there. And then after that, we now said, instead of us importing, with flour and pasta, why don't we maybe set up a flour milling? Okay, we'll import, the wheat, but then we'll process it, and then, you get a reduction in terms of, value addition. And, with that, we set up our flour mill. We started in Kano and then in Lagos. And then, of course, the big thing that came after that was the sugar. In Nigeria at the time, everybody was importing sugar. So there was a sugar refinery, and it was the only one, and it wasn't enough. So we felt, instead of importing, white sugar, why don't we set up, a refinery as well? So we set up that refinery, and then we're importing raws and then processing into white sugar. And by doing that, you save quite a lot of money, because, as I'm sure the difference between white sugar and raw sugar, is about $100, $120 per ton, depending on, the period and where it's coming from. So we were adding that value. And then after that, we thought we were also importing a lot of cement, initially in bags and then in bulk. And then Nigeria, we realized that Nigeria actually has been sitting on these huge limestone deposits. And we were like, why don't we start actually processing what we have rather than importing? That was when we now started, setting up fully integrated cement plants. And today, Nigeria is actually a net exporter of cement, even though what we have is still, net turnover based on the consumption, per capita, we could still do more. But we are exporting, cement, especially in those, areas that are very close to some of these countries. Like one of our plants, in Nigeria, in Sokoto State, is just about 120, 130, kilometers away from Niger Republic. So that makes it quite easy for us to export. So that was how we saw this thing. And today, most of the things that we're actually doing in Nigeria are mainly, using locally sourced materials to, to produce. Of course, we still import wheat, for our flour milling and, pasta. But with time, that also we see a big change, coming quite soon. But the cement industry is key. And that is what we're also trying to do in the refining industry, petrochemical industry, where we use the local crude and gas that is being fed in Nigeria for us to process, our crude into, all the products that we need in Nigeria.
Thank you very much for that clarification, sir. And just I would also, so now you've given us the historical background and the strategy. So I would like to ask you if you could just please guide us through, for some of us who may not necessarily be very familiar with the company, if you may guide us through your value proposition and what exactly it is that makes your business a top competitor in the continent.
Yes, it's very important, you see, because in any organization, any business you run, for me, I think the most important thing, is that you must, focus on your people, focus on, also, what you produce, quality, and also, focus on making impact, more than anything. Because at the end of the day, if you have good people, we have good product, and you push, you'll be able to really be able to have a company that, would be, sustainable for a long period of time. So for me, more than anything, is that you must have, the right people. You must focus, on making impact more than anything, and on quality. Because if you are able to produce, quality, at all times, to be able to, be able to get, the market all the time. For example, if you look at what we are producing, say like cement. When we started producing cement in Nigeria, everybody was only using or producing 32.5, and we decided that we wanted to start with 42.5, and then we are now producing someone 52.5 in Nigeria. So those kind of things, are quite important. The same thing with our sugar. If you look at what we are producing, sugar-wise, you'll see that we are processing, producing 20, Ikomsa sugar. The market in Nigeria only needs probably 40 to 45 Ikomsa, but the quality, 20, 25 Ikomsa is much better quality. So once we are consistent with our quality all the time, that is what makes, the difference. And of course, people, you need to really focus on your people. You need to ensure, that you have the right people, all over. And then more than anything, you need to always make an impact, focus on making huge impact in whatever you do. So these are some of the things that, to me, I think will make a company, sustainable for a long period of time.
Well, thank you very much. And I'm very glad that you actually touched on that, the point about making impact, because that leads perfectly to the next question, which I would like to ask, is that you just recently announced the launch of the 100 million Abdul Samad Rabiu initiative. And in line with our current theme, which is African development, rewriting our story and asserting Africa's future, which is, I would like to ask you if you can tell us a bit about your motivations behind this endeavor and the objectives, and how this can contribute to African development.
Well, to be honest, I've always, for a long time, been like, no matter what you do, if you are in a society and you are doing well, you should be able to give back to the society. The Abdul Samad Rabiu, initiative is the brainchild, of, my brainchild, and it is something that for me is personal. As we all know, there is a huge, development gap, in Africa in many areas, and I also believe that, Africans probably would be in a better position to address some of our issues here in Africa, So I decided to launch that, and the purpose of the foundation is to give back, to the society. So we decided to launch that, and I launched it in April this year. We're setting aside $100 million a year, every year. And, with emphasis on education, social, development, and, healthcare interventions, and we've already started that, we've made it in a way that, of the $100 million, $50 million committed, to Nigeria, and $50 million to the rest of Africa. The reason is because I know people would think, oh, this is so much money, but then again, you really need to do something, that would be impactful. We've already started, this, we launched it in March, and we've already disbursed so far total of, or committed, if I may, about $25-30 million. And that is, just within 2 to 3 months. And we expect to, actually, commit and disperse, most of this money before the end of the year. I think this is quite important, in order for, appreciate, that, God has blessed you, and you are in a position, to give back, and you should give back. And for me, it is a personal thing, and this is something that I'm personally driving. And I'm really quite pleased, with the way things are, going so far. This kind of things, for me, they are very, very important, be able to give back to the society.
Thank you very much, sir. And I'm sure that this activity will continue to have a multiplier effect in terms of improving conditions for many people across the continent. So just as before we run out of time, I would just like to ask you two final questions. If you were to, number one, if you were to start investing in Africa today, where would you invest? And then number two, what key message would you like to leave to all aspiring young African entrepreneurs?
Thank you. Okay. Well, I tell you, Africa, the opportunities are immense, and there are so many areas that, today, for example, given the I would do so much more in so many areas, but, if you ask me today, yes, of course, agriculture is quite important, and also steel, and if you look at in Nigeria, my country, we're sitting on huge reserves of, iron ore. And same thing with gas and coal. Okay, coal maybe, it's not something that a lot of people would want to touch now. But then again, these are the kind of things that you need. Yet we do not have any, big, fully integrated steel plant in Nigeria. Steel is the bedrock of industrialization anywhere, and we know it. So we have the raw materials, and it is quite easy for us to be able to go into not even necessarily produce it, but even just harness the resource, the iron ore, which is the main raw material for steel, be able to beneficiate it. And then maybe even if you are just using it for export, it's an area that has huge potential. That is one. Something with agriculture, agriculture, so many areas in agriculture that you can actually, make a lot of impact. If you look at cocoa, for example, that is a cash crop. In Africa, 4 countries in Africa are producing 75% of the entire world's production of cocoa, 75%. And that is a $130 billion market. Yet, Africa, West Africa, not even Africa, these are only 4 countries, that are producing, 75%, as Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Nigeria, and Cameroon. These 4 countries produce 75% of the entire world's production of cocoa. Yet we only get 6 billion out of $130 billion market. So these are the kind of areas that I think we need to concentrate on and add value. It's not good enough for us to just produce. I think it is, it is important for us to actually be able to add a lot more value to what we produce. So these are some of the areas, that you think, why is it that there's $130 billion market and we are producing 75% of the, raw material of that, yet we are only, getting a fraction of that in Africa. And the same thing with cotton. If you see what is going on, even in cotton, if you go to like countries like Burkina Faso and Chad, so we are not getting the value of most of these things. So if I were to, for example, say, okay, which area or areas, I'll look at some of those areas that we are actually producing, or rather, having the raw materials locally and be able to produce what we need, so that at the end of the day, we are adding a lot more value to, the things that we have here in Africa locally. Some countries have started actually, like Ghana. You can see Ghana is trying to add value to cocoa. They've started producing good quality chocolate. I was in Ghana 2 weeks ago, and I was actually quite, pleased to see that some of the chocolate they're producing in Ghana using local cocoa is as good as any, chocolate from Germany, Belgium, Switzerland, or the United States. These are some of the things that we really need to be addressing, so that we can, produce, we can use what we have. And the same thing with, even crude oil. In Nigeria, we are producing so much crude oil, yet we ship the crude oil, and then it gets processed, out there, and then we bring it back into Nigeria. And in the process, we are paying almost 2-3 times what ordinarily should have been the price. So these are some of the areas that we really need to look at, because Nigeria and other countries in Africa, we have so much resources, And all we need to do is to really sit down and harness most of these resources, and we'll be able to be where we should be. Because without that, it will be very, very difficult for us to actually, get that. As I said, this is just one example. And, believe it or not, going back to cocoa, there are only 4 countries in the world. 4 countries, produces 75%, of the raw material. And 4 countries in the world produce 75% of the entire world's chocolate. And these countries are Belgium, Germany, Switzerland, and United States of America. So these are some of the things that we really need to come together and see how we can harness most of these resources that we have. And this is just cocoa. There are so many other things. And I'm sure, what we have in Africa, if we're able to harness, some of them, not even all, it would be, a great opportunity for us going forward.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for all of the insights that you have shared today, the insights and the wisdom and the advice for the next generation of entrepreneurs. And I am sure that everyone who has heard this interview will be able to extract a lot of values going forward. So thank you very much for all of your contributions to our continent as well,
Thank you, Maro.